Dave, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And as Bruce, as you mentioned, I think I have one here.
Okay.
If you wanted to hand it down to the folks on the panel there too, just in case we didn't pick it up, that would be fine. There's an opportunity for questions here in the room, also questions online. And Tim is helping with that prospect as well. Well, I'm going to kick it off. I'm going to have an opportunity here to have each of our farmer grower panelists introduce themselves and also to mention a little bit about their cropping enterprise that they are currently operating in. And then I'm going to give you a second assignment. Let's just talk about the weather, since Bruce brought that up about how cold it was. But I need you to think back and talk a little bit about what your weather was like in 2024 in terms of when the rain fell, when it didn't fall, and that type of thing, and what might that have impact on your cropping operations. So really three things here: introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your enterprise in terms of what types of crops you grow, where you're located, et cetera, but then also comment a little bit about the weather, and then we'll jump into some other questions. So I'm going to hand the mic. Actually, we have to have two mics in this operation, so they'll hold on to both here. But to Jared here to my right to start with, and he can introduce himself, and then down to Dan as well. So Jared, you get the first take.
Well, welcome everybody. Jared Nordick, heart of the Red River Valley, right where the Red River of the North is formed in Breckenridge, Minnesota. The water runs north. Corn and soybean farm. Used to grow some wheat. It's been a tough road for us. We just got some high soluble salts, so to try to get yield out of it, about like soybeans. Got IDC, pHs are fairly high. Kind of a struggle to tell you the truth, but we've got corn figured out, and we're trying to move forward on moving to the next phase. A lot of drain tile right in my area. No irrigation really to speak of. We get a fair amount of rain. Last year's weather for me was the best year on our farm ever. I think the most amount of rain we had in one shot was like 1.25 inches. Otherwise, it was 8/10, 6/10, 5/10. It was about like running a center pivot. The best soybean yield we had ever had on our farm, and that goes through with the corn crop also. It was just a stellar crop, just unbelievable. But if you didn't have ditching in place and you've been a little lax, you had some prairie potholes that really showed up, and them guys lost about 40 bushel to the acres, about what it come down to. I just rented a half section right on the end of my driveway. It was 40 bushel less than what it was right across the road, but we got it tuned up. So surface water for us is huge. We send all that water to Canada, so we're also really cognizant of, our drain tile was back in the Discovery Farm project about 15 years ago, so we know what we're releasing to our folks to the north. So I think we're doing a pretty good job on stewardship and really work good with our conservation offices nearby. So that's the story, and open up questions whenever.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'd just like to start out by applauding Discovery Farms and SWCD for working their butts off to collect the data from all of this. I realize that is quite a bit of work putting that all together, and it's just incredible because someone told me once that you don't know what you don't test, and I think that's very important in how we farm today. So we farm in just south of town here. I'm sorry, I'm not holding this. We farm just south of town here. Been no tillage and cover crops for about 8 years. And going back to testing, our soils are producing upwards of 0.5 to 3% changes in organic matter in 8 years by reducing tillage and using cover crops. So I find that as an essential tool in our role as stewardships of the land and keeping the nutrients where we place them. We farm corn, soybeans, alfalfa, small grains, and this year we'll be adding sunflowers to our cropping system. We have 28 center pivot irrigation systems and utilizing irrigation water management as well as equip for cover crops. And this year we've started experimenting a little bit with aerial seeding. Got to critique our herbicide programs for that, obviously, but with the use of no-tillage and cover crops, we have learned that we have areas where we could make improvements with our livestock operation. We have adequate nutrient levels where we're further away from barns. We're starting to see P and K deficiencies more often in the root zone. So we actually purchased ETS Soil Warrior in 2021. So we've had that 2 seasons, and basically all the fields we have incorporated strip tillage to, we're seeing record yields, really changing the game for us as far as profitability goes. So, yeah.
Okay, I think you both did a very good job of giving the groundwork and so forth in terms of your operations that you're operating at here, one in Stearns County and one in what I would call the southern part of the Red River Valley. We had an opportunity, a couple of us got together last night to talk a little bit about soil sampling, and in terms of that, so what are some things that you've learned over the years in your different operations, perhaps from soil sampling, and how did that implicate nutrient management situations? Different people do different things in terms of that. So have you seen some trends, and then have you modified any of your operations in the field to allow for that or to compensate for that, or made any other particular changes or thinking about things in the future? So Jared, you're close. You get the first dibs here, okay?
Well, up in the Red River Valley, most of our fields are, rather square, full 80s quarters. Grid sampling for us, the soil is so uniform from about headland to headland within 2,500 feet that it's a waste for us. You can go out and poke a hole at the northeast corner and go to the southwest, and it's just so uniform for us that it's just really hard. And the co-ops have tried it, and they try to charge more money for it, and the guys have just got away from it because most of the big guys in our area just say, hey, we're blanket farming the quarter. That's what we're gonna do. There's a few small guys that are dabbling in it, but really low key in our area to have much for grid sampling. So,
Anything else new on nutrient management?
nutrient management, there's some guys, you know, nitrogen management's getting talked about more and more all the time, probably. Slow release nitrogen's probably our biggest thing in our area is the ESN. From there on out, it's just pretty much a blanket program, guys. Just do it the old fashioned way and nothing's really changing. But some strip tilling is coming in. Guys are, learning more about that. We're in the bottom of the lake of Lake Agassiz back in the days, so our water table is fairly high. So in strip till, it's been hard to get that soil to warm up. And with newer technologies coming of, seed bed finishers and stuff like that, there's some guys starting to have some successes, and it's taking some time, but we're all kind of standing on the sideline going, is it working or not really? So there's some change happening, but we're all trying to work with the neighbors and see what we can learn from there and keep moving forward and be stewards.
So in regards to soil sampling, I'll be the first to admit that our soil sampling program was pretty broken. Obviously, when we started adapting new practices on our farm, we didn't really know where to start. The co-op was always in charge of our soil samples. And when you're trying to make decisions based upon the size of our farm, it's very difficult to Okay. It's very difficult to make decisions when you're kind of shooting at a chalkboard. Or calling up your representative from the co-op every time you're trying to make a decision. So in 2020, we actually started pulling our own soil samples on our farm. Me and my brother divide and conquer. Basically in between planting, and as we try to split it up in between our crop rotations as well. So if there's small grains, we'll sample we try to put our sampling years on small grain years so we get consistent data. I will say we have had fields where I've seen 50 to 100 parts per million changes in potassium in one season in the soil. Now, I believe that's almost unheard of to see those results. So that's just telling me the variability of soil sampling, moisture. There's so many different things that play a role into our nutrient management. And it can't be, there's so many things we try to put a one size fits all to, and it just doesn't seem to work that way in our farm. But when we do soil sampling, basically I'll take a 40-acre field and I'll try and pull 50 to 60 cores on that field. So we don't really necessarily do grid sampling, but if I'm sampling in an 80, I'll split it in two and sample it 120 times. Mix it all up, so I've got a very, very good average, and I don't have grid sampling fees in my soil sampling.
Okay, another question here that we were talking about earlier in the past week, probably and myself, was a little bit about how you actually apply phosphorus in your programs. How often, in terms of a broadcast, planter, etc. But when you are going to make a phosphorus application, is part of a larger program? Any comments about that? And then I think at the same time, for case your situation, Dan, you have livestock, I believe.
Yep.
I'd like to bring in any comments you have about manure, and testing manure and so forth for those applications as well. But I believe, Jared, you're all entirely crops. Is that correct?
We actually are using a little bit of manure.
Okay, all right. We'll bring that in too in terms of that. But in terms of phosphorus, what are the sources? How do you bounce them off? And what kind of a regimen do you find in terms of if you do need it, how and when and how is it applied?
Yeah, so everything on our farm, soil sample usually about every other year, corn, soybean rotation, sample the soybean ground for the corn. Usually dry spread in the spring is 95% full loaded NPK scenario. We have played with some different liquids that are on the market to replace the dry spread P and K in furrow, going down with the planter like a 10-gallon rate in furrow. Mathematically, it doesn't add up to the same amount of units applied or pounds applied, but we have dabbled in it. Kind of keep jumping around because we're still afraid that we could mine the soil by keep using the same liquid year after year. So this year we're working with a company, and they're going to kind of try to implement probably a third dry P and K and then a liquid P and K in furrow to be able to offset them numbers. So that's pretty much our program up there on the P and K side. Not a lot of cattle in our area. I've got a buddy that's got a feed lot, so we've been buying about a quarter's worth of manure from him, getting it tested, and we're putting down about 5 ton on the productive soil, and the non-productive soil, what's going to sound backwards maybe, but where our soluble salts are high and our headlands are really tough, we're putting down 10 ton on that ground and trying to get woke up and get it producing, and that has actually been working pretty good, and that's beef manure is what it is. So that's pretty much our program.
So we have about, can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay.
We have about 1,000 head of cattle on our farm. So we obviously can't cover every acre with manure. So our first and foremost practice is cover as many acres as we can and split it up. And if we're running short based upon fertilizer removal, so we use Egg PhD's fertilizer removal app, very helpful. It's not 100% tried and true. Obviously, your potassium's not 100% on top. If you're bailing the stover off or whatever, there's still 50% generally in the soil. And so we take our manure and just try and spread it out as far as we can. But obviously, if tests are low, irrigated fields close to home, those sort of things will apply up basically 4 to 8 tons, depending on the test. Obviously, we've tested our manure, and per ton we're seeing 10 to 15 pounds of phosphorus available and 20 to 25 pounds of potassium. So as much as we can spread that out and diversify that, and been reading a lot, doing a lot of research on potassium efficiency on corn. So that's something I'm excited to dabble with, maybe do some experimentation with, is liquefied potassium applied over the corn. Obviously, we got to be careful with burning the crop, so it might be something we experiment with under fertigation practices, whatever best management practice suits. But I have heard that yes, about 70% of the crop's need for potassium is at tassel. So it'd be cool to see what we can get out of that.
In regards to application, any comments that you have at planting? Do you do anything in particular with the planter, or are you relying upon other times for applications? And maybe just reflect on any benefits that you've seen. Obviously, you're both in a cold area here, so those types of situations as well.
Yeah, you know, year in, year out in the last, you know, 25 years, I think we've all learned how to grow corn a lot better and be stewards. You know, the liquid fertilizer for us in the cold temperatures has been a big plus. We've also learned that if we can run our field cultivator a day or two ahead of our planter and let that soil warm up, we can pull the liquid fertilizer off our planter and not put it in furrow, and we can still get the same amount of early vigor and plant health out of that plant. And come harvest time, the side by sides are the same or sometimes even a little bit better where the liquid fertilizer hasn't been. So we're kind of changing our liquid programs on and off a little bit to kind of try to predict what the weather is going to be. And if we can know we're going to have a warmer spring, we've kind of pulled our liquid out a little bit and just let our dry do the program. And that's been very helpful for us too. But nothing fancy on our planter, just using a totally tubular system right before the seed gets put down, putting that liquid P and K in furrow. And yeah, I've had, you know, no issues with that at all. So that's been our program.
So, our planter puts on, 4.5 gallons of 1034O and about 12.5 gallons of 28%. 2.5 gallons of ammonium thiosulfate, ran 2x2x0 or 2x0 sorry. Anyways, we use totally tubular, surface applied on each side of the row. And the reason we do so is, generally, we just didn't want to do as much disturbance. So we avoided 2x2x2. Also, it's just another part of the planter you have to worry about and maintain. If something goes wrong with that, starts dragging, now you're messing up the seed trench, and that's something we just wanted to avoid altogether. So as far as applying manure goes, most of our manure is surface applied. We do not work it in. Something that's been controversial, obviously, over time, this is what really brought me and excited me about Discovery Farms is we're testing that now, and I think that's crucial to what we're doing, and if we can ultimately make positive impacts without tilling the manure in, because my concern with tilling it in is obviously on our rigid or deeper slopes, we're gonna create erosion, and that's something I don't want to see either. So, and erosion, as we all know, is going to cause the same problems that we're ultimately fighting against, which is washing the nutrients into the watersheds.
Well, you both brought up Discovery Farms a little bit. Let's dive deeper into there. Now, Jared, you indicated that you've been involved in the past. Maybe explain a little bit about what your involvement really entailed with Discovery Farms, what happened on your operation, and what were some of the things that you've learned or hope to learn. And then I think, Dan, you are currently involved with that, and maybe also explain a little bit about the instrumentation, what that's involved in, and how things are looking from it, and what you hope to learn in the future. So comments about that.
Well, it was an interesting email. We got it from a local soil and water office. The district manager sent me an email and said that there was a group that would like to start taking some water samples and putting some drain tile in and doing some research. And of course, I'm the kid on the farm, so I'm like, "Hey, Dad, you know, check this out." And he's like, "Okay. Well, guess what, folks? I'm gonna be honest." He says, "Well, you know what? Looks like a bunch of bureaucrats coming out of the cities. They want our information, and what are they gonna do?" And I said, "Well, Dad, maybe we're doing it wrong. Maybe we don't know. Why can't we work with a group like this and learn from it?" Well, he started warming up to the idea a little bit. We reached out to the soil and water office and asked them for the honest, and met Tim and moved forward. And it was a brand new quarter of drain tile. It was freshly installed that year. So we pretty much opened it up to anybody that wanted to come. We've put on multiple field days on that site. I've seen quite a few faces in here that I've seen on our property up in Rothsay. And, you know, it was an eye opener. You know, we all want to point fingers at the neighbor for pumping water out, or we want to do this, or the neighbor's doing that, or the neighbor's doing that. And, you know, sometimes we need to stop and realize as producers that we need to learn, we need to be stewards, we need to be conservation people, we need to be open-minded. And that was one thing for us that it really did do, is it opened up our thought process. And now I can tell my neighbors to the north that, no, I'm not pumping a whole bunch of nitrogen down my ditch. I'm not pumping a whole bunch of P and K. I'm not doing that. My boys are drinking the water. One of them's now taller than me. And I said, you think Miracle-Gro works good? You should see what this stuff does. I mean, so yes, was it scary at first to where's the data going to go? Absolutely. But we also have to be open-minded. And as we move forward, and we're going to face some tough times ahead with administration and whatnot of, where's tile going to go? Where's surface drainage water management going to go? I mean, for me, surface water is huge. I mean, if we can run a scraper every 2 or 3 years, just to keep that surface water off, we have taken land that was very non-productive in the kind of not really prairie pothole region, but by drain tile and doing this, made it very productive in the valley, rich, good soil up there. So yeah, kudos Discovery Farm. That opened up another avenue through another water research project that we're doing. And we're doing also some controlled drainage by holding water back in the soil profile. So instead of putting tile in at 36 inches deep, we're putting the tile in at 36 inches deep, but we also have like dams, control structures that are holding back 18 to 24 inches of water instead of releasing all that water. Let's try to hold some back and be a steward instead of letting it all go down the stream. So yes, we're draining them usually in the fall to flush the system, get rid of the salts and different things like that. But this is it's been a big eye opener on, and instead of releasing all the water like we originally thought we should be doing with drain tile on pattern tile, we're actually probably holding back half of that amount of water and using it in season. And that's almost been like a putting a center pivot up in some of that soil. So some of our worst soil is now our best soil by doing that. So
So, our discovery site,
Yeah, you're good.
our discovery site is, mainly, surface tile. We don't have grid tile or anything like that, or pattern tile. So our site is on tile inlets that run into watersheds or lowland areas, and that is where they have done all of our testing. Tim has displayed and showed me all of the data they've collected. It's very interesting to see. Obviously, we had one issue with one of the sites starting out, so kind of restarted this spring and fresh with the site. So I'm interested to see what the next couple of years brings as we obviously adapt and move sites. So
Okay, so that sounds good, and I think, Bruce, we can talk a little bit more about Discovery Farms later in the program from Minnesota Ag Water Resource Center and what the program entails if people have questions about that. We have a couple of minutes left here. I wanted to touch on one other thing, and that is in terms of tillage, and you think about the nutrient applications. Is there some interaction here? What have you gone to for tillage? And then throw in the last part of the question. I don't think you have it, Jared, but maybe then. Other crops, you mentioned sunflowers, but also we have a fair amount, obviously, of livestock that some of it's grazed and forages or pastures and that type of thing. Any other comments outside of our traditional, corn, soybean regime in terms of that, but also mention about successes that you've had with tillage or things that you've gone to or things that you might be able to do.
yeah, I've always been one that corn has kind of been king up on our farm. So we used to do some similar to like an inline ripping on soybean ground because I want to build that root structure for corn. Most everybody wants to DMI the corn stalks because that's what gets rid of the trash and it looks good and it's the right thing to do. I kind of took it as a backwards approach, but the last years now we've been just running a straight point on a chisel plow, trying to go down about 8 inches, use that fracture, but yet leave some stubble on top for wind erosion. We've got some wind erosion problems up in the flats up there, trying to plant more tree rows to offset that. But when the wind blows 50 miles an hour, folks, and it's that flat, it's just gonna move on you. I'm sorry. There's bean ground that's not worked that is sifted black, and it's never seen a chisel plow. I mean, it's just a shear factor. So freeze and thaw early on gets to be tough. Um, you know, we try to hit right away in the spring when we apply the NP and K. I like a field cultivator within hours of behind it. We run 2 field cultivators as fast as we can to hurry up and incorporate that, leave that ground lay, like I said before, a day or two before we plant it to get that temperature back up in there. And usually in 7 days, I've got corn coming out of the ground. So figure I'm doing a pretty good job at that. The other thing we're implementing is the swear word, the moldboard plow. Not on every acre, but I think it's a tool in the toolbox that when you listen to the forefathers that sit around the coffee table, that farming this top 6 inches with a chisel plow, a field cultivator, and ripping it all the time, then sometimes if you roll it over, you get new aggregates on top, and you can bury some of that organic matter. So just playing with it, small increments right now, but we've seen some big benefits on where we have pulled a moldboard plow back out again and just rolled it over and started fresh again. So I know there's a lot of people that say, "Oh my Lord," but I'm also a producer and I got to do what I do to make a living and stay in business also. So we're not going to plow every acre every year. We're going to just do baby steps, but I think it's a tool in the toolbox. And I think you're hearing that even in the no-till industry that some guys are talking that we got to pull a moldboard plow out and bury some of this P and K and get it useful again. So that's what we're up to.
So on the topic of tillage, I've caught myself being a purist as a farmer. You want to do the right thing by the land, obviously, but there's been hiccups in the road on our corn and soybeans, specifically on our corn. No tilling and 2 cover crops can be a quite challenging task, especially in cooler temperatures. So we have seen, especially we do get some cover crops that will reach waist high by spring planting from pea planted acres. Obviously, we're not doing peas this year because we decided to do sunflowers for bird seed. And that's just a different management technique. Kind of want to be in control of our own harvests and our own plantings and applications. It's hard to reach like-minded people doing what we're doing now. So it's been a change or a leap obstacle that we've trying to overcome now. But yeah, as far as the tillage practices go, I'm obviously preferred no tillage. I don't think we'd be strip tilling on our farm if my brother hadn't implemented it. I do see positive, definite ROI by using strip tillage. So it's got a place, it's got a time. We don't do a lot of tillage on our farm. Obviously, if we find compacted areas from harvest or things like that, we run a straight minimum tillage ripper, no points on the side. And if needed for ruts, we'll take out a vertical tillage tool to fix ruts. But we try to manage our tillage timing and all things based upon soil conditions. Obviously, we don't want to be out there when it's too wet and those sort of things.
We have an opportunity for questions here, and I don't know, Tim, I know we have one that came in online, and I'm just going to mention that unless there's other ones, and we'll just go to that. So it's not obviously everything that comes in is on the topic per se, but this is the one question that came in, and it said in terms of the utilization of a micronutrient program on your crop or situation or on your farm, have you made applications of micronutrients? Have they been on the seed or foliar? Or have you utilized them? I guess personally, from my standpoint, I always like to say, well, what's the response been and the return on investment and so forth. So any comments from a micronutrient in terms of that or a program that you've been incorporating?
Yeah, when we're doing a liquid program, we definitely are doing 2 quarts of zinc, a full micro pack, you name it. I really do believe moving forward in the next years to come, micronutrients are going to be a major thing that we're going to start looking at. I think NP and K are going to go to the wayside. They're going to be the basics. They're just going to be the stand aside policy, and we're going to have to learn, the copper, all the little micro things. I think that's where the plant health is going to start coming in, and that's where the fruits and vegetables are going to come from, is these micros as we keep moving forward.
So one thing I will mention with the change in our farming practices, I have put a lot more emphasis on crops response, spending more time paying attention to micronutrients, because that's something that we normally would treat like the stepchild, right? It's not nitrogen, it's not potassium, it's not phosphorus, but um, as of recently, I've started experimenting with the use of compost extracts in furrow. Last year was my first year. I did it on every acre of soybeans, 100% made on my farm fertilizer, and much more stable. Obviously has to be harvested in a timely manner, so it's a logistical challenge making these things in the morning before I go planting. Some days I don't get planting till 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and I have to make that up at night. But this year on every acre of my farm, making my own nutrients, I have increased my soybean yield by 5 to 12 bushels an acre. So I see that as a large financial, if you will, increase on our farm. And it's just, it's been a wonderful thing, but on corn, it's something definitely needs more work. We're feeding with cover crops, we're trying to feed microbes, and those sort of things get to be a different level of management that I still do not understand fully. So I'm educating myself, but what I love about doing soybean programs is I initially would have never done anything before. I bought a planter and added liquid to it to do these things so I could learn, and I pretty much paid for it tenfold in one season. So that's been pretty good. Algae is used quite a bit on all of our alfalfa acres, and this year I'm actually going to put living algae on every acre that I farm.
I think Bruce gave me another question that came in here is from, I guess it's directed to Dan. How do you terminate your cover crops? Have you had any challenges with cover crops such as insects, et cetera? So I'm just going to hand it right back to you.
Yep. So this is what goes back to the learning factor.
A little farther away. Yeah, there you go.
This is what goes back to the learning factor. We've had some leaps, obviously. SWCDs here in the room, they remember when I had cutworm extremely bad in my soybeans. I lost 200 acres from cutworm infestation in my soybeans. I walked out into a field of what I thought was the most beautiful soybean crop I was ever going to see on dryland acres. And within 7 days, it was completely gone. So it comes back to management technique. Obviously, make sure you're getting out there in a timely manner and terminating your cover crops. In our region, water is a very, very important tool. You got to think about your glass half empty or half full. And I always want to obviously caution on the half full side, because we can be out of an inch of water in 3 days. So terminating the cover crops on time, and that's something that was a challenge initially. Now we put 100% effort into the planter leaves the field within 48 hours, the cover crop is terminated. So my brother's chasing both planters. He's switching from corn and soybeans, but we've went 100% to non-GMO soybeans. So terminating cover crops with Roundup has to be done before the crop has emerged. And those are logistical challenges, of course, that we have to overcome, but just make it a priority that it's getting taken care of in a timely manner.
So we're just a minute or two because Bruce is the timekeeper. Okay. I was going to ask us if the audience had a question. Can we do that? Is there anybody in the audience that had an opportunity for a thought here for a question? Otherwise, certainly there'll be time after that. Okay, so going back to the online is regarding soil testing and fertilizer rates. How do you treat your rented versus owned land? Okay, different or the same? So I don't know, Jared, that situation where you think about it, if that applies to you, rented or owned, but regarding soil testing and rates, but are you into that ballpark?
Well, I guess I treat it the same. If it's mine, I have pride in it. It's my name that's on that dirt, and I'm gonna treat it the same. So I think that's why last year when I got a quarter of land on the end of my driveway, when I got the folder slid in front of me, they wanted me to farm it because they know how I was gonna treat it at other rented land. And it was even in the contract that I had to mow the roads 4 times that year because that's the way they want it. And they know that's how I treat my ground. And he said, I know it's not gonna affect you. So I think that's the biggest thing, and that's how longevity and building a relationship with your tenants are. My dad's got some land that we've rented for 43 years, so I think when you can have something like that, I think that goes to show that they know that you're investing into it like it's yours. So we take pride in it.
Obviously, transparency is key. We have several landlords that, as of recently, have sort of demanded that we keep small grain in the rotation. Avid outdoorsmen, they love looking for sheds in the spring, and that's just been an added benefit. There's nothing cooler than driving by a field in the middle of December and seeing 75 deer out in an 80. It's impressive. I take pride in that because I feel like that's my duty as a stewardship. And as far as leases go or caring for land, it's all treated the same. I treat it all as if it was my own, and I treat it as if it's something that I'm going to pass down to my kids one day. So.
I think we're wrapping this up. I'm turning it back. Bruce, we want to thank both Jared and Dan. And since I have the microphone, Bruce, I'm going to take advantage of it just to put a real plug in. Yeah, by the way, I'm Dave Nicolai with the University of Minnesota. I'm a crops educator on a regional basis, but we have strategic farming that we do, and that's every Wednesday throughout the cropping season. So those are coming up from 9 to 10. So you want to go online, you can certainly do that. Okay, so enough of a shameless plug there, Bruce. So